Google just scooped up Windsurf CEO Varun Mohan and several of the top researchers in a $2.4 billion licensing deal. This comes right after Windsurf's $3 billion acquisition deal with OpenAI collapsed, thanks in large part to complications involving OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft.
That's a pretty brutal to have a deal of that size collapse. What happened there?
Windsurf was set to become one of OpenAI's biggest acquisitions. This is a big number, $3 billion.
3 billion, yeah.
But the deal ran into trouble because of Windsurf's concerns about Microsoft, which is deeply embedded in OpenAI's infrastructure, and of course also runs a kind of competing Visual Studio Code. I mean, they have their own Microsoft Copilot, GitHub Copilot. So they're in the coding space, and there were some concerns about that. Windsurf reportedly didn't want Microsoft getting access to its tech under the existing agreements, like, are all the cool things we're doing in coding going to end up in GitHub Copilot? That doesn't seem good. Microsoft refused to grant OpenAI an exception to keep the IP shielded. The exclusivity window expired, and the deal died. And Google came in.
Okay, so they were going to be acquired by OpenAI, and then now instead Google is acquiring them. Is that the deal?
Google is not really acquiring them. Instead of becoming part of Google, Windsurf's top talent is headed to Google. Mohan and co-founder Douglas Chen will join the Gemini team to work on agentic coding, while Windsurf stays as an independent company under currently interim leadership. The new agreement also includes that $2.4 billion as a non-exclusive license to Windsurf's technologies. So Windsurf will keep serving its enterprise clients. There's some questions about the comp packages for employees, like how well treated are employees being in this licensing deal, what's going on. And the company keeps operating independently. So what was going to be a huge deal for OpenAI is now both a big win for Google and an interesting model for what used to be the acqui-hire that's now a higher licensing deal, but not an acquisition. So that was an interesting model that I think we may see repeated for some of these places.
Wow, that is super interesting. It's a little Silicon Valley drama with some big price tags.
Big price tags, more of this billions of dollars for top researchers coming to companies. But I do think if companies, big tech, can get away with this, the goal of acquiring companies and then shutting down their business doesn't sound very appealing. If you could just do a licensing deal and get the top talent, this may become a model for future deals. So that was an interesting one.
Wow, very interesting.
All right. Well, next up, we got an AI safety nonprofit meter showed that experienced developers actually took longer to finish real world coding tasks when using AI systems. So even though they feel more productive, the clock says otherwise.
This one blew my mind. Obviously, like the whole thing all of us want to use AI for is to actually be more productive, not just to feel more productive. But so how do they measure this?
So the researchers followed 16 veteran open source developers across 246 tasks on massive code bases, think millions of lines of code, 22,000 GitHub stars, big developer code bases. And the devs thought the AI tools that they would rate how long it would take them to do tasks. And then they would do some with AI, some without, and you would see how they compared to their estimates. And the devs thought the AI tools would save them 24% of their time, but in practice, they were 19% slower when they had the AI enabled.
And why is that the case? If the AI can do so much more for you, why is it slowing you down?
It turns out they spent more time coding and writing prompts and reviewing the AI generated code and waiting on the AI to generate responses. The funny thing was, as I said earlier, even though they was actually taking longer as they did all these things as opposed to just writing code, the developer still thought they were 20% faster when they actually asked a perceived increase in speed. So it's really interesting to see that difference in feel and reality. I will say this felt like a difficult test for AI in the sense that really large code bases, not the easiest thing for AI to get a hold of versus greenfield projects. These open source projects tend to have very strict style guidelines that are kind of institutional knowledge that these developers would just know. They'd know where to go in the code base to do things. So kind of not an ideal set of tasks for AI agents. And I think you would find different if you said, start from scratch and build me a mobile app. I think you might find different results. So maybe not the perfect test for this, but at least in this field, really surprising results, and makes you want to just remember, if you think this stuff's speeding you up, maybe you actually want to test to see if that's true, because apparently sometimes it feels like it isn't really.
I want there to be a follow-up study, though, to be honest with you, because there's a question for me of like, if you feel more productive or faster, do you actually end up accomplishing more at the end of the day? Versus if you feel like you just spent hours coding and your brain is fried from that and you're exhausted, and then you're more likely to be like, I need more of a mental break, versus the feeling of going faster and being more mentally stimulated by doing some other thing. Are you then excited to get to the next thing? So that's the follow-up study I want.
I'm also curious what happens as you get to more agentic agents and they can operate in the background. So if it's 20% slower, but then I stop waiting for the thing to do things and I send 10 of them out and then I review the code as it comes in, maybe there's a net speed up, but I've got to stop thinking about doing one thing at a time and start thinking about managing a team of agents doing multiple things. I think there's a number of follow-up studies I'd love to see to dig into the details of this. And of course, would love to see studies outside of just the coding environment, which is so studied for AI, and into some of the more other kinds of uses, but certainly something very interesting for anybody in the kind of white collar workspace that's using AI personally to keep their eye on.
Yeah, very interesting.
Google just launched two new open models under its MedGemma family, including a massive 27 billion parameter version aimed at interpreting both medical images and patient records. And they also rolled out a tool called MedSig Lip that pairs images and texts for smarter clinical analysis. It reminds me a little bit of at least the goals of the MyDXO that we talked about last week that the Microsoft put out. These new models can handle everything from chest x-rays to skin conditions. And here's the wild part: the smaller version is lightweight enough to run on consumer hardware like your laptop or even your phone.
Amazing. And how do the models perform? What are the early signals and benchmarks?
Performance wise, these models are setting new standards on the benchmarks. And we've talked before about our caveats with benchmarks, but the 27 billion version scored an impressive 87.7 on the MedQA benchmark, beating out similarly sized models. And in real world testing, MedGemma's radiology reports were accurate enough for patient care 81% of the time, right in line. And this is not my favorite stat, with a human radiologist. And I didn't love that that was that was the bar for human radiologists, but there it is.
Awesome. Okay. And are the models just in the lab right now? Or are they in the wild? Where can we see them?
There's some benchmarks, but they're open and customizable, so people are already getting their hands on them and using them in cool ways. One hospital is adapting the models for traditional Chinese medical texts, and another is using them to triage emergency X-rays. I love that triage use case where you're not really making clinical decisions, but maybe you're triaging which things do I look at. I'm in the ER. What is the most important thing to go after? The bar for being a little bit wrong is maybe a little bit lower there because you're really just sequencing, and the need to do that quickly is really important. So there are some people actually putting these out in the wild, and we'll maybe find some more detailed use cases to report on those in the future.
I hope that this becomes like the new WebMD, where like instead of just like searching WebMD and then, you have a headache and a second later you think you're dying, but actually have AI on your phone would be amazing for consumers to have this. So they see like, hey, this mole, is this normal? And it's like, yes, or it's no, you should go and talk to a dermatologist versus we all just go to the dermatologist all the time and we gum up the clinics with a lot of things that aren't really problems. So it would be great to see these actually in consumer hands at some point.
I think the consumer angle will be fascinating. It will be really interesting to see what kind of regulations the FDA puts in. A lot of those consumer apps typically have to have some sort of doctor oversight, and there's liability attached to that oversight. So that'll be a big question about, I think that we have to answer as a society is, do we care about opening up access where more people have access to really good but not perfect information? Or do we really want to hold the standards and liability tighter? So that'll be an interesting barrier for broad consumer adoption, but really fascinating.
Fascinating.
Interesting news out of North Carolina State. Researchers just rolled out an AI-powered, what they call self-driving chemistry lab that runs nonstop, collecting 10 times more data than traditional approaches. So instead of waiting for one reaction to finish before starting another, the system performs dynamic, real-time experiments, capturing data every half second, and then using machine learning to steer toward the most promising results.
Interesting. Okay, so self-driving chemistry lab. What does that mean?
But Malad Abu-Hassani, a corresponding author of the paper on the work and Alcoa professor of chemical and biomolecular engineering at North Carolina State University, it's a mouthful, good title, stated, quote, "For example, instead of having one data point about what the experiment produces after 10 seconds of reaction time, we have 20 data points, one after a half second and each half second after that. It's like switching from a single snapshot to a full movie of the reaction as it happens. And instead of waiting around for each experiment to finish, our system is always running, always learning."
Okay, that's amazing. I actually like his explanation because at first I'm like, I don't actually know if it's scarier to think of a self-driving car or a self-driving chemistry lab because it seems like a lot could go wrong in that situation. But so what's the impact of this sort of change?
And they're really aiming for faster discoveries, less waste through the process, and way less use of chemicals. The team says this could shrink time to discover new materials for clean energy, electronics, or sustainable chemistry from years to just days. So that didn't sound that dramatic in some ways, but that's a pretty dramatic change. So
That's pretty
that's
cool.
a pretty cool story. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Very cool.
Runway just dropped their Act 2, their next generation motion capture model, and it's a pretty big upgrade. This new system could take a single video or image of a person and turn it into a fully animated character, capturing everything from head and face movements to another adding hands, body, and even background, all while preserving the original artistic style. So you can kind of act something out and then have a character play you, or you play a character like a Pixar movie, which is pretty cool.
That is very cool and amazing. Is anybody I imagine this is the type of thing like when, OpenAI started doing the Studio Ghibli and everybody wants to try it out, but is anybody actually using this in like a professional setting?
Runway is a really interesting company in this space. So behind the scenes, they're not just releasing the tech for consumers to play with and McDonald's to make fun diss tracks or Popeyes to make fun diss tracks at McDonald's. They've struck some deals with big Hollywood players like Lionsgate and AMC Network. So even though there's some skepticism in the AI industry and the film industry about AI, behind closed doors, they they're adopting some of the stuff pretty quickly, and Runway seems to be right in the middle of the shift towards using AI in actual production.
Interesting.
So we'll go from Runway to Adobe. Adobe latest generative AI for their filmmakers is not just about video now. Adobe just rolled out new tools in its Firefly suite that lets you create sound effects using your voice. So you can literally say clip clop while watching like a horse walk in your video, and Firefly will generate synced hoof steps with a little text prompt to tell you, what you want. And then the voice can really help for both style and then for timing. If you want to time with things in the video when the sound effects happen, you can do that with your voice. I got to admit, I went right on and tried to do Star Wars, like pew, 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 laser, and got like a couple versions. And my kids thought it was really funny, but it was fun to play with.
I'm gonna definitely play with it this weekend. I don't know if I personally will play with it, but my son, who is 11 years old, and his superpower is sound effects. It has been his superpower since before he could even speak. He like will watch a movie and provide his own sound effects as he's doing it. And so I feel like this is going to be a strict upgrade in his capabilities. Right now, he does a lot of stop motion animation using Legos. So he'll watch a movie and then he'll make a stop motion film with his Legos and he'll supply the sound effects. But now they can be more realistic. So I'm excited.
They can. And this is a great tool because you can now sync them with the action. And once you've got the video produced, this is kind of the perfect thing for him to add on. So that'll be fun. It's a fun one to play with. And then we're going to go to Google. And unfortunately for Google, not the best news out of Google. So no new release. They dropped VO3 at the end of May. Creatives have jumped in, but here's an interesting one. For the first time, it lets users generate dialogues along with the video. So they got synced audio. You can, add sounds. It'll actually put text in and then read it out loud for voice, which is a big change. Except it also currently throws in AI generated subtitles that are full of gibberish, and it just puts them on the bottom. And they're not like meant to be there. It's just in the training data, and they're kind of hard to get rid of because they're not like a separate element in the video. They're just embedded in the video. So now these poor users are trying to figure out, how do I rip the subtitles out? And even if you ask it, please don't put in subtitles, apparently sometimes it will.
So their launch this week wasn't a launch, it was just discovery of a new bug?
Yeah, people have been using this quite a bit, but they've been a lot of people out there this week just saying, "Hey, I'm having trouble getting these weird subtitles full of random words out. It's not the text that the person is speaking; it's just in there. What do I do?" And burning through a lot of credits trying to generate stuff without trying to revise their prompts to not generate subtitles, and it's getting a little bit of frustration from that creative community. So, not the best week for news from Google.
Yeah, not so good. That's like when I told you my friend who tried to record her Zoom meeting and got told that half the meeting was in Czech. She was like, "It was not in Czech. It's in
It's to
English."
me, it's a great reminder that I heard someone describe the edges of machine learning and AI capability as jagged, which is kind of like they kind of come up very quickly and in unexpected places. Like as soon as it got to being able to take text and generate audio along with video out of the text, you would have figured it could have handled subtitles, but no, it just couldn't. And it threw them in randomly in these kind of weird places where they break on the edges that you don't really expect and they can't really predict. It's a really big problem, I think, for anybody trying to deploy this stuff in the wild is like it can break in unexpected ways in places that just surprise everyone.
For sure.
OpenAI released their ChatGPT agents. They had Operator that was released a couple months ago to mixed reviews where it would kind of like take over, a browser and a window and do things for you. And people kind of didn't find a great use case. This is similar-ish. So now ChatGPT agent, instead of just answering questions, the agent can run its own virtual computer. So it can autonomously browse the web, write code, create documents, presentations, and spreadsheets specifically. It's got features for and switch between tasks, all without constant user prompting. It kind of merges the old Operator and deep research into kind of a smart self-managing system to do stuff for you.
Okay, and what's it gonna do for me? How am I gonna use Agent?
So in the launch demo, OpenAI showed agent booking travel, building a presentation, setting up a product and placing an order. So like it'll do searches for, best coffee maker under $150 and order one from Amazon for you. It can connect to apps like Gmail and GitHub and access APIs and kind of handle multi-steps. Like, so you see it doing a lot of stuff. I actually set it out this morning on a task to figure out a better promotion plan for this podcast. And I had a nice chat with O3 about the plan. And then I said, turn this into a presentation and make it good and go out and find what the AI colors and logo and put it in the presentation. And it did. It produced a pretty nice, like a 7-page presentation on different posting strategies for YouTube oriented content as opposed to podcast oriented content. And I was impressed. So we'll see. This does seem to be the direction. You've got Perplexity, open source or not open source, but beta testing their browser, Comet, which also has a lot of autonomous agent concepts built into it using your browser. So this and OpenAI rumored to be releasing a browser. So this kind of agentic browsing the web, doing things for you, maybe in the background so you can come back and see it later, seems to be the direction a lot of folks are headed.
I love it, and I loved the nuance in your instructions. We always tell people if you're gonna use AI, you have to be very clear in your instructions, and so I love how your instructions was, "Do this thing and make it good.
Make it
I
good.
was like,
And
make it
go
good.
find my logo and put it on the presentation for me so I can actually send it to people without having to work on it. And it had a PowerPoint file for me to download at the end. And I was like, pretty good, pretty good.
Pretty good.